Radio Raheem here with Jim Lampley. Everybody knows this face and knows your voice, sir. We are here at Mandalay Bay. There's so much boxing news that's come out really like in the last 24, 48 hours. I'm going to kind of give you the rush through it. But first of all, I saw you after the first fight. We had a private conversation with Ward Kovalev. I'm curious to know now that we've seen the weigh-in, we've seen the workouts. How do you think this fight goes? Is it different than the first fight?
Probably not. You know, it's a tremendous matchup, and both guys have a revenge motive, and that's rare and interesting. They don't like each other, and sometimes that affects a fight, but usually it's more of a distraction than anything else. You know, they're 33 and 34 years old, so neither is in a position to make some kind of wholesale change in what they do. So the general confrontation that we saw the first time around, Kovalev with his power game, jab and right hand, against Ward's tactical capability, his adjustment capability, and his sophisticated defensive and inside skills, that stays in place. It's still the same thing. The big question at the beginning of the fight is who can seize the psychological advantage by affecting the first few rounds the way he wants to. Ward wants to make the first 3 or 4 rounds of this fight feel like the last 3 or 4 rounds of the first fight to Kovalev. Kovalev wants to go back to what happened in the first half of the fight last time, and this time his biggest job is if he can get Ward down, he needs to keep him down or put him down again so that he doesn't have to go to the scorecards at the end of the fight.
Simply put, is this more of a mental challenge for each fighter or physical? Which wins out on Saturday night? The more physically dominant fighter or the mentally prepared fighter?
Well, interestingly, both of them have a way in which they think they can be better physically. Ward had a right knee problem, which he said bothered him in each of his last 2 fights, and now the right knee problem has been solved, so he thinks that his movement will be better and cleaner, and his ability to explode will be better in this fight. Kovalev believes he hit a wall in the 5th round of the first fight, and that he didn't sustain his energy through the 12 rounds, and I agree. In looking back at the fight, I realized that I had given Kovalev credit for landing hard shots in the late rounds when they weren't really all that hard. They were more arm-weary arm shots, and they were landing, but they weren't achieving the same effect that he had achieved earlier in the fight. And I like what Kovalev has done to try to help himself be better over the course of 12 rounds. Brought in a new strength and conditioning coach, a strength and conditioning coach from a very scientifically sophisticated sport, biathlon. Maybe this guy can find a way for him to even out his energy level over the course of the 12 rounds. And as for Ward, you know, if it makes a big difference that the right knee is better, we'll probably see it in the early rounds.
I've got to give you a little bit of boxing whiplash here. Maybe from boxing to event is how I'm going to call this thing.
Riggs King?
No, that is science. That is boxing science. I mean, I give Rigondeaux all the credit in the world for being a pugilist and a scientist. But also, when it comes to Floyd Mayweather, you have to give him that kind of accolade. But I cannot put that kind of moniker on a Conor McGregor. I can't even call it a boxing match. That's me personally. I'm curious to see how you digest the news that this fight is actually going to happen, and do you consider it a boxing match, sanctioned or not?
Well, I guess, you know, by the rules, it's a boxing match, but it's a boxing match between a pure boxer, an extremely skilled pure boxer, and a guy who comes from a completely different sport. So to me, it's a competitive absurdity. And in the last 24 hours, I've learned some fascinating things that I didn't know about Conor McGregor, most especially that if you were to define his style as an MMA fighter, he's a counterpuncher. He's not an attacker. He's a guy who stands back, waits for people to come to him, tries to knock them out with one big shot. Well, we all know what Floyd Mayweather does against a counterpuncher. He stands and watches him and waits for him to do something because he's certainly not going to attack and play into the hands of the counterpuncher. So there's one disadvantage to start with right there. I've also learned CompuBox tracked 10 of Conor McGregor's MMA events, and in those 10 events, he spent a total of 21 minutes on his feet. Now he's going to try to spend 36 minutes on his feet in a single fight. This isn't competitive. It's not even remotely close to competitive. The only way that some kind of competition breaks out in there is that it's not on the level. Because if Floyd comes in, his pride is intact, he wants to get to 50-0, he's going to do the best he can possibly do, he should not lose any second of this particular competition.
Everyone who has an opinion on this fight either blames McGregor or Mayweather for putting on this spectacle and robbing the fans for money, or celebrates the two of them for putting on what the fans want to see. As people who live in this boxing universe, I don't credit or blame either fighter. They can get this kind of money. That's what fighters do. If they're prize fighters, they want to get a prize. If they can get that kind of money, it's hard for me to say they shouldn't go get it. But when it comes to the boxing commission sanctioning a fight like this, making it a legal boxing match under the sanctioning body of the Nevada Commission, does that give you pause at all?
Money talks, nobody walks. And at the end of the day, you know, if Floyd Mayweather were Gennady Golovkin, then you might worry about what's going to happen here. But Floyd Mayweather is not Gennady Golovkin. He's not Canelo Alvarez. He's not going to hurt somebody in there. I could see Floyd winning a knockout by landing a series of pot shots, you know, because I think he'll be able to land basically whenever he wants to. So I could see him just riddling McGregor with enough punches that at some point McGregor or his corner says, what's the point? But I think more likely you're going to see another 12-round paint job, and at the end of the so-called fight, those who spent $80, $90, whatever, for the pay-per-view are going to be saying, why exactly did I feel it was so important to see that? But when Bobby Riggs played Billie Jean King in tennis 45 years ago, if we had had pay-per-view at that time, everybody in the country would have bought it. Did it prove anything? Was it meaningful? Was it thrilling to watch? No. It was just something that you had to see because your neighbor was going to see it. And now we live in the age of social media, which is the death of civility and to a certain degree the death of sanity. And social media will be the sustaining platform for this next Riggs King event.
If I can bring you back to a fight that is absolutely worth its medal
now
and
we're
worth the
go
ticket.
To September 16th.
Well, you know where I'm headed. I'm taking you right down the calendar, brother. Like when we see these two guys get in the ring finally, we've waited so long. Fortunately, it didn't turn into a Mayweather Pacquiao type of thing. We got it relatively in good time. But my first question about this fight is, was it smart for Canelo to wait out a couple years? And with the wear and tear, if you believe that that's happened with Triple G, does it make the fight a more even competition?
Well, of course, because Triple G is now 35 years old, and when first we were talking about this fight, he was 32 or 33, It's very easy to conclude that you've seen slippage from Triple G in the last couple of fights because he had more trouble with Kell Brook and obviously going the distance with Daniel Jacobs than had been the case in his prior matchups. Now, maybe that's not slippage because Brook was technically better than a lot of the guys he had fought up to that point, or maybe he wanted to allow Brook to hit him to try to gull Canelo into finally taking the fight. We don't know, and we're not going to find out until September 16. What I know for sure is it's a violent, aggressive, ultra-skilled attacker, Gennady Golovkin, against a violent, aggressive, ultra-skilled counterpuncher in Canelo Alvarez. You couldn't make a better matchup. They're made for each other. And, those people who feel dissatisfied by the absence of violence of what they're going to watch on August 26, save another 70, 80, 90, 100 bucks because you can get back everything you've lost by watching what happens on September 16th.
Do you have a fighter taking the edge in that fight? Do you feel like will win it?
Oh, I feel like you have to slightly favor Golovkin. You have to slightly favor Golovkin for a couple of reasons. Number one, he's the guy who's been weighing in at 160 all the way through his professional and amateur career. And it is utterly second nature to Gennady Golovkin to make 160 pounds. He knows what that feels like. Canelo's never weighed in at 160. He weighed in at 164 for the Chavez farce, and every other previous fight he's weighed in at 154 or 155. So he's dealing with a brand new weight level for him, and he doesn't know 100% with certainty at this moment what that's going to feel like when he gets into the ring. That's point one. Point two is Gennady probably has a little more power. He's a go-forward attacker. That may help to present the image that he has more power, but at the end of the day, day, 23 knockouts in a row don't lie. He's probably slightly the more powerful guy. If the fight had been made a year and a half ago, Gennady would have been a 4-1 favorite. Now it's going to be something like 5-2 or 3-2. He's still the favorite, but he's not as big a favorite as would have previously been the case.
And that speaks well of Canelo's strategy, as you said.
It also speaks well for what Canelo's done in his recent fights. I mean, he's fought very well, and he has shown you precision, and he's shown you power, and, you know, he's looked good, and that's made more and more people think, oh, maybe he's got a chance against Triple G.
One fight that, in the last one I'll ask you about before I let you go, that may fly under the radar, but I hope it doesn't, because these guys are polar opposites. One's had his share of trouble outside of the ring and may have an opportunity here to shine, and that is Adrian Broner, stepping in the ring against Mikey Garcia, one of my favorite guys to watch, but not a star really in the sport yet, you know, outside of the real boxing heads. Break that matchup down for me, and how much are these guys' lifestyles going to play a part in what happens when they step in the ring on July 29th?
Well, I make Mikey Garcia a heavy favorite in the fight for the reasons you've just cited. Lifestyle is one. Approach is another. At the end of the day, I think that their behaviors outside the ring demonstrate to you that Mikey Garcia has total belief in himself. He is absolutely convinced that he is a great fighter and can beat anybody with whom he goes into the ring, and he makes all of those judgments and calculations in a very rational and sane way. Adrian Broner is a showboat, and I don't believe that he believes in himself at anywhere near the level of how Mikey Garcia believes in himself. Adrian Broner has some punching power maybe, but you know, he's shown craft of failures in his losses, and Mikey Garcia doesn't have losses, and I think it's abundantly clear who's the favorite in that fight.
Save some of that Hall of Fame voice and analysis for tomorrow night. Thank you so much for giving me so much time. Always a pleasure. The guy that I watched when I was a kid and am still trying to be at least a cut as good as Radio Raheem with none other than Jim Lampley.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.